Hi, this is Beth Pittman. I'm a high school English teacher at GCA, and I wanted to take this opportunity to make this video and give you an overview of how you can create some differentiation in your OHS along with some gamification. Now, there's a lot of technical in this, how this is set up. This video is just designed to give you an overview of thinking through gamification and what that might look like in an OHS. If you're interested in the technical of how to do it, just email me. I'll have my contact information at the end of the presentation, and I'll be happy to help you work through the technical of setting something like this up, because that will take much longer than you want to watch in this instructional video as you begin to think about this. Now, disclaimer with this once again is that yes, this is differentiation in the sense that students have the choice to choose different assignments along their journey in the game. So they are experiencing different content based on their choices. But we aren't differentiating as teachers based on our knowledge of them as a student. So they're differentiating themselves because they are making choice. But through that choice that they're making, or sometimes the lack of choice, you can then begin to understand your student and differentiate more with that data through your OHS. So I'm just going to give you an overview of the game and how it generally works for the student, and kind of give you an overview of the technical of it. But so you can start thinking about how something like this might create both engagement and allow some differentiation in your classroom. So the first thing that we did, we were studying dystopia literature, and so I gave it a title, A Perfect World, the Game. And in part of gamification, you have to reward the student for accomplishing a mission or a challenge. And so we had 5 levels in our game, basically 5 weeks of instruction, each week's a level, and as they complete a level, they earn a particular badge. And they collect those badges, and I used release conditions so that they could see that inside a badge module. I themed the badges based on the content that we were studying, and so when they received the badge, they received some description and connection back to the text that we were reading and studying and the concepts that we were studying. And that was key through the gamification, is it's themed throughout, so they feel like they're coming along on a journey with you, if you can wrap your mind around that. Each level, so every student has access to level 1, just like you're playing a video game, right? So when you turn the video game on, you get level 1, but you have to beat level 1 to get to level 2. And so they were pacing themselves as they moved through the game. That created differentiation in our synchronous sessions because students were at different points in the game. So then we had to make sure that we were assisting students where they were in their game. So as you differentiate here inside your asynchronous instruction, it will have direct result in your synchronous. So you have to react to both. They have to work together. And that's something that my team, we all had to kind of discover as we worked through this. But I had this instruction divided into parts, and then once they completed their challenge, then they would receive a badge. This is all connected through release conditions. So everything is connected with release conditions based on what they have completed. So once they complete the discussion post, the release condition then allows for the badge to release to them, and then they're rewarded with that. Then the next level is conditionally released based on the completion of the assignment above, which was this discussion post. So once they earn their badge, then level 2 would release to them. You can notice that I create a graphic here showing them, okay, now I have this badge has not been earned yet. And so the students could then work through the game as they and collect their badges. So they knew where they stood at all times going through the game, okay? And so this initially isn't differentiation, but it created differentiation in our synchronous sessions because in week 2, when we were trying to cover content that's covered in level 2, we had students that were here in level 1, forcing us to come up with a plan to deal with these level 1 students that needed to be remediated or caught up or weren't ready for level 2. And so then we had to create breakout rooms, different self-paced work-throughs to get them caught up, and use our small group sessions to make sure that they're remediated to get to level 2 with the rest of the students. Okay, so even though the differentiation isn't necessarily evident here, it looks like we're just pacing them through this game. Differentiation became clearly evident in our synchronous sessions as we worked through these. So they worked through each level. And at the beginning, it's very straightforward, just like if you're playing Super Mario Brothers. Complete the first level, complete the second level, and you're working up on their ability before you give them more choice or more room in the game. So level 3 is following that same very linear process, right? Just complete the challenge, get the badge, right? But in level 4, we introduced the ability for them to choose what level, where they want their level to go. So we had them be able to choose which novel they would like to read. And so they could choose their path. And this begins to even differentiate more, right? So you have half of your students reading one book and half your students reading another. My team was very good, and we developed quizzes for each novel. They all covered the same standards. All of them were standards-based, but we had one quiz for Giver and one quiz for Anthem, both aligned the same way, but covers each novel. And so this was based on the student's choice, so what they wanted to read. And as we worked through this, we found out we had a whole other group of students that didn't want to choose any novel, and got them stuck in level 4 of the game. And that created a lot of talk and interest in our team as to what to do with students that get stuck in something like that, and then how to move forward with them and how to differentiate even more with those kids. So level 4 allowed them to choose which novel, and then they worked through the content. Now you can see in this how this level looks like it's double. So there's like double the length to the levels 3 and 2. The reasons being is because if the student chose Giver, only the Giver parts were released to them. If they chose Anthem, only the Anthem parts were released to them. Now, how did we accomplish this in release conditions? We created a quiz and then linked it to an unused gradebook item and hid that gradebook item. This presented information and data to us to tell us A, what novel the students chose, and B, if they didn't choose a novel at all. And it then allowed us to set up the release conditions so that they only see the content for their novel. So we were able then to create a release condition linked to a quiz that they could only see based on their response to this novel. So you'll notice if you look at the release conditions, there is a release condition on the level, and then from there, the parts that are inside the level after part 1 has a release condition that's linked to what their response was on this quiz, what score. So if they chose the Giver, they got 100 on the quiz. If they chose the Anthem, they got a 0 on the quiz. And so all of these parts have release conditions based on what they chose, in that unused gradebook item. Okay, and then as we move through level 5, since they have been able to choose their path, we once again allowed them to choose their path again to complete their summative assessment. They could choose to do what we called it the boss level. This is the final level of the game. So they could choose to complete an OHS assessment with short constructed responses, or they could do a project newspaper activity with constructed response also. Once again, the assignments were completely aligned with each other, required the same amount of knowledge of the standards. It was just different. They had a different way of presenting their knowledge to us. Once again, level 5, began with a quiz for them to decide which path that they wanted. And then once they chose that path, we created another unused gradebook item linked to that quiz, giving us that data to tell us what they chose or what they didn't choose, or if they didn't choose at all, and then use the release conditions to link the appropriate parts back to so that the students only saw what they needed. I know this is like a really lofty overview. There's a lot of technicality to how it's set up with release conditions for students to move through. But initially, as we work through this PD, I wanted to share it with you so that you could begin to think about how you could create gamification inside your OHS. It might not be a whole instructional cycle like we did here in world literature. It might be something that you do just for 2 or 3 weeks with your students to help them kind of move through some content that's difficult or unengaging. And then how you can build it using choice. So starting off with something that's pretty basic and then creating choice inside of that. Now, disclaimer, I cannot say that we didn't have hiccups along the way or have kids that we felt like we lost in this. And that also brings a point for like analysis of should you differentiate, then use this for some kids that need the engagement and then take a more streamlined approach for other kids that don't. And so as you begin to become a more advanced user of the OHS and thinking about how to differentiate, those are questions that you can ask yourself. Is this good for all students? Or maybe it's just good for some. And after we did this in world literature, that was a question I think that our team had. And so this next cycle, we didn't gamify the next cycle. We made it more streamlined and to see how students performed. And that will answer our question as to maybe it being, is it better for some kids and not all kids? And so I hope this gives you something to kind of ponder or think about. Once again, it's a lofty overview. If this really excites you and you're really interested in learning more about how to do it, just reach out to me and I'll be glad to give you a more in-depth overview about how to set up the release conditions to get the OHS to do this for your students. I hope this is helpful and gives you some things to think about as you think more about differentiation. Thanks.